Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Ignite Your Heart Masterclass. Today, I am so excited to introduce Amelia Fortes. Welcome, Amelia.
Hi, Nikki. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Well, thank you for being here. And for those of us who aren't aware of what you do, would you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a self-love coach and I specialize in helping spiritual singles find partnership, whatever that partnership looks like for them. I like to live life outside of the binary, and I feel like relationships come in all shapes and forms and sizes. And I really specialize in helping people figure out what that is and how to best attract that based on who they are astrologically and also based on human design.
Oh, that's very interesting. So I would love to know a little bit about your background. How did you get into this? Is this part of your personal story that you ended up uh, teaching self-love to singles?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I did not have, I wasn't, I didn't grow up with a lot of like really healthy, conscious relationships, which is what a lot of people talk about these days. Growing up. So I didn't have a lot of examples for that. Actually, a lot of the men and women in my family, I experienced them having lots of different partners, tumultuous relationships, just meeting a lot of people. And so I never really experienced, at least from observation, like what long-term, healthy, conscious, emotionally healthy, mentally healthy, spiritually healthy relationship looks like. It was always either one partner had more power in the relationship, either financially or spiritually. And so I experienced a lot of chaos and toxicity and control in relationships. And that ended up translating into my life when I started dating as a teenager. And actually, when I was 19, I got into a really abusive relationship. However, I didn't know it was abusive right away, which I think a lot of people who have been in that situation, like you don't always go into a situation knowing what it's going to look like a few months down the line, a few years down the line. So I was absolutely not prepared for what ended up happening. And it started out with just little verbal, insults here and there, and eventually became really full blown physical, emotional, mental, sexually abusive. Um, and fortunately, I was able to get out of that, but it did take me a couple of years to get out of that with therapy and with support, and also realizing there were some healthy relationships that I was at least exposed to, and just me being like, I don't feel like myself. Like my life with my boyfriend shouldn't feel this tumultuous, and I shouldn't be this upset and hurt all the time. And so I was able to leave that relationship and did a lot of healing after that. And it was actually a few years later when I was reading Mastery of Love, I think is the name of the book by Don Miguel Ruiz, who is the famed author of The Four Agreements. But he also wrote a book that was specific about love and relationships. And there was a line, and actually a paragraph, like a section in the book that just really slayed me, where he was talking about how and why we tolerate abuse from other people, and that it comes back to however much we abuse ourselves, however critical we are of ourselves. And that, if someone abuses us or hurts us or harms us more than we harm ourselves, it's easy to walk away because we're kind of like, like, I'm not having that. But if someone harms us even a little bit less than we're already harming ourselves or that we're used to harming ourselves, we will tolerate it endlessly.
Wow.
It was a really powerful line, and I immediately thought about that relationship. I was in my early 20s when I read this book, and I was 19 to 21 when I was in that relationship. And I thought about that, and I was like, okay, I don't condone abuse of any kind at all, but what part was mine? And as I was doing this inner reflection, I realized it was self-love. Like, if I loved and respected myself even a little bit more than he did, I would have been able to recognize that. But because it was like this subtle conditioning and breaking down of who I was and how I saw myself, that's how long I stayed. So I took that and I just was like self-love. It's all about self-love. You can have a relationship, you can get married, you can get the house with the white picket fence and the 2.5 children and a dog and a cat. But if you don't love yourself, it'll be impossible to, one, be happy in any relationship you get into, and two, if you're single, it'll be relatively impossible to attract that. And so I did a long journey of self-love and getting out of toxicity and deconditioning myself from toxicity and being treated poorly. And I was able to then find and create just really beautiful, loving partnerships, not just romantically, but also in business and career and friendship and family. And so I'm very passionate about self-love being that necessary must-have ingredient to really creating the relationship you want, or even attracting that relationship.
Thank you for sharing your experience. Because I resonate with part of that story. I had a beautiful, wonderful relationship, and I was still looking outside of myself. And then I attracted somebody who wasn't available to me, and I kept going back. And at some point, I thought, there's something wrong, right? There's something missing. Why won't I choose the healthy one that's right in front of my face? And I realized it was because part of me was neglecting my own needs, wanted a vibrational match of somebody who wasn't going to give me what I wanted.
Absolutely. It's a common thing. What you're saying is so common. And that happened in my life and that happens in my clients' lives. It's like intellectually we know, consciously we know, but subconsciously our vibration. I love that you use that word because that's a word I use often as well. Like what is coming in or what you are choosing is where you're a vibrational match. So how do we become a vibrational match, especially in my situation, for something that I've never experienced? So
Mhm.
that's where the work is, right?
Interesting. Yes, the vibrational match to connect to true love is really starting with loving yourself. And you had mentioned, even in the beginning, something that really caught my attention was, why do you use like astrology? Why do you use like human design? And how does that help somebody navigate maybe their personal relationship or themselves?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad that you brought that up. You know, self-love is a big part of the big ingredient. And I feel that astrology and human design are great tools, I'll call them, or technologies, some people will call them, to learn more about yourself, which then I think the byproduct of that is more self-love and compassion and understanding. Like if you know that you're more of a sensitive, watery, intense person, depending on who you date, they can either enhance that and bring out the best of that, or they'll be not a great vibrational match. Let's continue with that for you. And they'll always be like a butting heads. And like, I'm not the type of person with astrology where it's like, okay, well, what's good for a Pisces? Well, this is what's good for it. Because to me, that's kind of basic. Like I take astrology and human design to the next level, where first we take a look at your charts and see like what is the best of you and how can you learn to love those parts or enhance those parts and really strengthen those parts so that you can be the best of yourself. Because then, when you're the best of yourself, you can then go out into the world, into dating, online, offline, wherever, and you know yourself so well. Not only do you know yourself, but you also love and respect yourself. So then, when you're out meeting people, it's easier to discern if something is a match. Because I think kind of what we were talking about with our personal experiences, we get in our heads a lot, right? Like, okay, like the term good on paper, we talk about it all the time. Like, why don't I choose him? Why am I not in love with this person? They're good on paper. But good on paper doesn't necessarily mean good for you or right for you. Or a wonderful human being doesn't necessarily mean it's your love, it's your soulmate, it's your partner. So we come back to home to ourselves first, look at our charts, and really enhance that and get to know that even more deeply. Like, more deeply than what anything you could find online, because there's a correlation between the two, and really enhance that and be with that, so that when you go out into the world on a date or on an app, or you go to a speed dating event, or someone introduces you to someone, you have a strong foundation. Because I think a big like missing piece for a lot of people is they're out dating and they're like, oh, dating apps suck, or there are no good men available anymore. They say all of these things, but they're coming to the party with not a strong foundation of like who they are and what it is they want and need. So at that point, anyone could either sound like a good idea and they're a terrible idea, or sound like a bad idea, but maybe they're actually a good idea. And so that's why a lot of singles come home from a date or from being out just feeling really disheartened and confused, which I think a lot of our audience might resonate with that. I certainly resonate with that. So I had to get really real with myself and know my strengths and know what a good partnership would look like for me. And I
Yeah,
think I'll give an example, right? So I'm quite a fiery person.
I can sense that.
And I also have a lot of deep sensitivity with the water. Okay. So I typically don't do well, let's say, with another very fiery person. Now, it's not to say that that couldn't work, but we would both have to be elevated and evolved enough to understand how fire and fire mix.
Yeah.
So typically, and I'm typically not attracted because, opposites attract. I think there's some truth in that. I'm typically attracted to more like grounded, chill kind of people that are more earthy. And earth goes really well with my water, but I also understand I'm very attracted to very earthy people. I need to tell them, like, and they need to understand, and that's why the dating process helps, because it's like I'm also very fiery. So if you're a lot more sensitive and you don't know how to navigate those triggers and sensitivities, it might not be a good match, because just who I am naturally wouldn't fit. And we want to be natural with date. Like we're talking about like calling in like the one or the soulmate or like a really good match. And you don't want to have to work too hard, I don't think. Yes, relationships are work, but we don't when you're at home at night after a work day and you're chilling on the bed, you don't want like the natural way you breathe to like piss your partner off. You know what I mean? So that's why it's really important that I bring in astrology and human design and help people understand who they are on a much deeper level.
I really love the tools that you're bringing up because those are some of the things that I use navigating my own path back to self-love and realizing, oh, these are just part of who I am and how can I nurture this versus what I felt like wasn't acceptable when I was younger and being told like that's not okay. It's not
Yeah.
okay to be sensitive and emotional. It's not okay to be kind-hearted and soft. Instead, it was like, those are some of my strengths. And so I attracted somebody. My husband was always with me again, but going through this process of the emotionally unavailable person, we actually reconnected very recently, and we tried to have a friendship. And I just realized, like, after I've gone through all this process, we were not a good fit at all. Even after like working through the attachments that I had to him, now it was just like I see him for who he is, and I realized there was no connection. He was very surface level, and I wanted emotional depth. And that was part of my Scorpio, right? That's my
Yep.
I want emotional depth and intensity, and I want to get to know you. And most of my friendships reflect that back to me. And in my relationship, I can have that conversation.
Yeah.
Realizing,
Oh,
oh,
and that's why it's really important that you found that self-love, because when that self-love is a little bit shaky, that external validation of the relationship working ends up being more of a priority. But when you came back right to that self-love and knowing who you are, it was no longer like you no longer took that it wasn't a match as like such a deep rejection, which is I think what a lot of singles who are frustrated face. It's like when you learn that self-love, something not being a match isn't so devastating. It just is what it is. But when you have that shaky self-love, if someone's not a match, or if someone's even like just not that into you, it can feel so devastating because they're already touching upon the wound that you have inside. But if you have that self-love and you're just like, I know who I am and I know what I want and I know what I need, if someone's not a match, it's not devastating anymore. And
Mm,
that's like a big part of my mission to support people with, because I get that and I've been there. I've been to that, like, ugly face crying in the shower. Why won't it work? And now you want to get to that neutrality of like, it's just not a match. And how freeing is that? Like, how freeing was that for you? And
right.
knowing where you came from, being like so attached to this person and just being like, I don't even have to demonize you. I don't even have to like talk smack about you. It just wasn't a match. It's so freeing to just be that light about it.
Absolutely. Yeah. At this point, it was like, I'm happy in my relationship. I'm happy in who I am, and we don't need this to work out. And it was okay to let it go. And it was just easy, right? There was no attachment. Like you said, there was no rejection or
Yeah.
that fear.
Crying in the rain. No, why?
Right, right.
Yeah.
And before it was like that every single time. It was like a back and forth thing. Every single time I decide to leave or he decides to leave, it was like, oh, I feel so hurt. I want you so bad.
Yeah. And it's like our happiness then becomes dependent on whether or not another person stays,
Exactly,
which is
exactly.
huge. If your happiness can depend on you and your own fortitude and your own self-love and your own strength, then partnership, this or the search for partnership doesn't have to feel so heavy or overwhelming or frustrating. Which to me, I'm a firm believer dating should be fun. Like that's the fun part. But so many singles, it's like so hard and it's so devastating and it's so disheartening. And I'm like, no, it's fun. And think about it. When you do attract like the love of your life, the one or whoever, whatever you want, then you'll never be single again. So being single is actually like a very special time. And that's one thing too that I tell a lot of my clients, like, okay, we're gonna attract your soulmate, your love, whatever you want to call it. So you'll never be single again. So like how can we really honor this time? It's so important.
Can you talk about a little bit about the dating process, right? Because a lot of people might enter into the dating process and they say, oh, well, I don't have the skills. How important is it to be upfront and authentic, like right there and then? Or do you have to ease your way into it and kind of, like, oh, I shouldn't reveal everything about myself?
Well, this is such a good question. I think the dating process starts before you even go out dating. And I've seen this, to me, it felt obvious, but with literally all of my clients and many of my friends, it's not that obvious. Before you even go dating, you have to have an intention. I think a lot of people just kind of on autopilot go dating because they want a relationship or because they're supposed to because they're single. And so they go out. I mean, because I talk to people like, okay, tell me about who you're dating. Tell me what's going on. Let me see your profile. Like I'm literally asking these questions. And it's like, it's very clear that a lot of people, maybe even most people, go out into the dating world with like with either no intention or like a faulty intention, let's call it, right? So the very first thing you should do is have an intention. Like, are you intending to just have fun? Or are you intending that you're looking for something serious because you're actually ready for something serious? Like, what is your intention? Then when you go out, because then you don't have to have so much guilt or shame about it because your intention is clear. If you want to have a hoe phase, power to you, then have that intention. I'm just having fun. But a lot of people get disjointed where they say I'm just going to have fun. So then when the person says I just want something casual or I just want to have fun, but then they go home so devastated and insulted. And it's like, well, you said you just wanted to have fun. So now you're attracting people who or choosing people who also just want to have fun. But if the fact that you're going home at night or complaining to your best friend or your therapist, like, why won't he be in a relationship with me or why won't he choose me? Then your intention is not actually to have fun or just have fun. It's to find something serious.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of people aren't as honest with themselves in the beginning before they even go out on a date. So that's the very first step. And then the second thing, in terms, like, to your question of like how honest should I be? I mean, I'm all about honesty and vulnerability. Now, you want to pace yourself. So I like to think of it like I work with my clients on what I call a dating plan. And it's just like a nutrition plan. If you have a goal to get your waist snatched and peach booty bums, like peach booty cheeks, and, toned arms, and a flat stomach or whatever, okay, you have your plan. You work out this many times a week, you go to these classes, and you also have a nutrition plan. This much protein, this many veggies, this much carbs, eat this many times a day. It's the same thing with dating, right? You're not going to go in on the first date and trauma bond and share like your all of your childhood traumas, nor would you want to hear it. You want to have a plan, you want to pace yourself. And I think, without going into too much detail, because everyone would be different, in general, it's the way I like to view dating, the process is it's information gathering. You're just gathering information about yourself and about the other person to see if you would like to gather more information,
Yes.
aka go on another date. I think people without a strong intention or with a faulty intention, they go out and they expect, especially if they fall in love right away. If you don't fall in love right away, then oh my God, like I'm more into you than you're, and we get in our heads about it. But if we kind of just remove the high stakes pressure and just go in and like, just here to gather some information and have a good time. Of course, we always want to have a good time. And that way, like you lose the pressure of it, right? It's not like, is he the one? I used to do that all the time. Are you the one? Are you the one? Will you be my next boyfriend? Will you be my next girlfriend? Like whatever it is. Are you the one? Are you the so much pressure and they can feel it and you feel it and then it gets super awkward. But if you're just going just to like gather information, have a good time, try something new, try a coffee place you never tried, go mini golfing, whatever it is, and have like a fun activity with it and you just be yourself and you're just here to gather information because the right person or the right people will naturally fall into place. You'll feel that ease. So if something's like too awkward or too weird, you're just gathering information. Now, if it's not enough information, then you can gather more information, aka go on another date. It's just like I like to like relieve the pressure. I feel like a lot of singles go out there, so much pressure. They feel it. The person they're on a date with feels it. It's super weird. That's what creates the awkwardness, I think. But if
So
you
there's
just remove the pressure, like, yeah, you can just chill. Yeah.
what I'm hearing is there's a healthy balance between like first have an intention, but then second be open. Like
Oh, I love that. That's a great way to bottom line it. I said a lot more words than that, but yes, be open and just chill. Look at it. Yeah.
You had a resource for like talking about the deceptions. Did you mention any of the deceptions yet, or could you go into maybe a couple of them?
Yeah, absolutely. And I did kind of mention the deception. So I'll just kind of give the context. I've been studying and obsessed with dating and relationships like my whole life. Just, and I say my whole life because even as a child, I was always interested in how different people interacted and things like that. And then as I got older, I studied, I read tons of books, podcasts, gone to workshops, you name it. And I've also coached many, many people through the dating process. And I have found I like sat with this research for a really long time, and I have found that whatever issue you're having with relationships or dating can fall under one of five deceptions. And the resource that I have is all of the five deceptions, as well as what that might look like to you in your dating life, and also how I've supported a client through that deception. And some tips for the medicine or the antidote to that deception is what I call it. And I did mention a couple without naming them. So the first one is denying your true desires is deception number one. Many singles will go out, like they can literally say to you, I'm looking for casual, and you're not, but you're just like, well, it's better than nothing. So that's deception number one. We deny our true desires, and we're afraid to go out into the dating pool and say we're looking for something serious because we're afraid we're going to scare someone away. But who are we going to scare away? We're going to scare away the wrong people. Because if you want something serious, someone who doesn't would be scared away. Someone who does would feel relief. So, and I call them deceptions because it's very tricky. We're deceiving ourselves. So that was one, like when you don't go out with an intention, that's kind of like going out without really knowing what your true desires are and owning them and saying, this is what I want and not being afraid of it. Being able to say, I want to have kids in a year within a year and not being afraid to say that because why should you be afraid to scare someone away who doesn't want to have kids in that timeline? You want to scare them away, you know? So that was one of the deceptions. And the other deception that both of us kind of covered a little bit was unhealthy power play. And it's the concept that there's an unspoken, unconscious power play that happens a lot when we're dating. Either we think we're better than, or we think they're better than. Like we either put them on a pedestal or we somehow put ourselves on a pedestal. So when we put them on a pedestal, that looks like, you know, when you're chasing the unavailable people, like you mentioned, when you're staying in an abusive or harmful relationship, like we both mentioned, you're kind of giving them your power. So there's no healthy, even adult to adult connection. There's a power play there. Or sometimes we make ourselves better than someone else. Like I was stuck between both, where I was super obsessed and really wanted the unavailable people, but like the healthy, available, open, vulnerable people, I was just like, they're boring, right? Like, so that's one of the ways that we put ourselves on a pedestal and create this power play by we need to make the healthy person boring so that we can push them away so that and then we make the unavailable person exciting. And so there's just this never and so I was just exhausted going around that loop. So I had to come into right relationship with myself first so that I could then know how to be in right relationship with someone else. So those were two that we covered. Another one I can speak on really briefly is because I think a lot of people relate to this is that infamous checklist. So that's deception number 5, which is to create that we create a checklist based on features and benefits, that whole good on paper. So we did talk about that a little bit. And I don't knock a checklist, but it needs to be the right checklist. So you don't want to have a checklist of features and benefits, like I call it, like tall, dark, and handsome, good in bed, good job. Because there's a lot of tall, dark, and handsome, good in bed, good job people that are jerks or abusive or narcissistic. So you don't want to go with that deceptive checklist. So it's a deceptive checklist. They look good on paper, but they're not actually good for your heart.
Mm.
Yeah.
And before we end today, I always ask my speakers, can you give us a tip, tool, or healing meditation, whatever the tool is, so that we can begin to map out a healthy relationship and map out what it is that we can do to create a long-lasting one.
Absolutely. And I think I'll say the antidote to that deception of the checklist is to have a values-based checklist. And when you download my PDF, I'll go into much depth on all 5 of the deceptions. But the tip that I can give you is don't look for good on paper, you know, the tall, dark, and handsome, good in bed, knows how to read an astrology chart. That doesn't mean anything. You want to choose from values. Do they value family? You know, a lot of times when people say, I want someone with a lot of money or with a good job, what they're really saying is they want someone who values financial openness and vulnerability and stability.
Mm.
So someone having a lot of money, you know, what's the one thing most people fight about? Money, most relationships. So you want to check their values about money. What's their relationship to money? How do they value it or not value it versus do they have a lot of it? So making that shift from features and benefits to values on your beautiful, gorgeous checklist that I know you all have, will really help you decide even who to go on a date with. You know, I've dated a lot of people that were good on paper, but their family values just didn't match up with mine. And family, especially if I'm thinking long-term relationship, like family is so huge and so important to me. And if you don't even understand what my family values are, let alone relate to them, let alone resonate with them, let alone they're also your family values, it's something, it's a yellow flag, I would say, to look out for. You know, someone could always learn, but I don't know. I'd rather the values line up more up front so then I don't waste my time, you know. And we're not here to waste people's time.
Absolutely, because this is all about finding a committed relationship and learning how to keep that relationship. So you don't want to be in the dating pool for too long, trying out things that are not really in alignment for you. So thank you for sharing the value aspect because now you're looking for something that is true to your heart and not just maybe the materialistic or like what they have and what they look like, but really what is good for you, your heart, your soul, and what it is that you want to align in a futuristic part of what you wish to experience in the relationship.
Exactly. Exactly.
So thank you, Amelia, for sharing that with us. And before we go, I'm just going to mention that Amelia's free gift is right below this video. And if anyone is interested in working with you, can you provide your contact information or your website?
Yeah, absolutely. The best way to contact me is through my website, ameliafortes.com. There's a contact page there. And if you resonate with what you learn from the 5 deceptions and you want to work more, definitely contact me there.
Wonderful. Thank you, Amelia, for being here. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. And I will catch you in the next masterclass.